Some people say that sport is just a game. It drives you nuts when people say that, isn't it? And my wife says it all the time to me when I come home a little bit upset about losing a game and I have to stand outside to cool off for a while. She says, oh, don't worry, sport is just a game. It's just a game. And yet, some people say sport has the power to change the world. On a sunny day, June the 24th, 1995, Nelson Mandela did what we just saw in the photo there. Rugby World Cup final. He came onto the pitch as the leader of a divided nation, dressed in the green and gold of the Springboks, and presented the trophy to the winning team. The movie Invictus is being written about that moment. It was an incredible moment in sport. It was a game-changing moment, really, in the recent history of South Africa, as it brought a nation together. A few years later, he said the words we'd just seen on the screen: sport has the power to change the world. You're here because you love sport. You're here because you play sport, you enjoy sport. God's given you gifts to compete in sport. And you know that sport is a wonderful thing. It's enjoyable, it's fun, it brings you together with people that perhaps you wouldn't normally spend time with. You build friendships that last. You go through victory, you go through defeat. And sport has kind of game-changing moments, doesn't it? Yet sport doesn't have the power to change the world. Jesus Christ has the power to change the world. In sport, there's game-changing moments. In the early church history, there was game-changing moments. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at one of those incredible moments in the church's history. We've just had it read to us. And you may have thought, that's pretty random. Why on earth are we spending time in Acts chapter 15? Let me put it in context for you. Right at the beginning of Acts, Jesus is with the disciples, and he is about to leave them. And in Acts 1, verse 8, he says to them, you will receive power from on high. You will receive the Holy Spirit, and then you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Some of you will be doing your dissertations at the moment, and you are probably doing what I did, which you just basically read the abstract of the paper and work out whether it's any good or not, and then you don't bother reading the rest. Well, please don't do that with the book of Acts. The abstract is that one verse, Acts 1, verse 8. You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Holy Spirit empowered people being witnesses to the ends of the earth. And we pick up the journey as it's gone to Jerusalem and to Samaria and Judea, and now it's starting to filter to places that, well, the believers at that time couldn't even believe that it was going to go to. Certainly not the Jews, that even the Gentiles, those who are not God's people, were becoming God's people. And we pick it up at a really crucial point, a game-changing moment where things could have gone either way. The game was in balance. The whole life of the church, the future of the church, was in balance. Acts chapter 15. Let's have a look at what happens. Well, what we have right at the beginning is a dispute. Doesn't look like much, but when you grasp it, you'll see why it's so important. Paul is in a place with Barnabas called Antioch. It's in the kind of Judea, on the edge of the earth, going into the Gentile territories. And he has seen people who are not Jews become Christians for the first time. And he and Barnabas are thrilled and amazed that people that they can't even believe would ever become Christians are being saved. The gospel is having an impact in people's lives that they could never believe it would do. And then these guys, they come from Jerusalem, and they say this: unless you are circumcised according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. This brought Paul and Barnabas into sharp dispute and debate with them. Very nicely written, kind of English phrase that. Probably misses the point slightly. When you actually look at it, they're fuming. They're absolutely outraged. This sharp dispute is not a kind of small disagreement. They are fuming. Paul loses it. And you think, well, why? What's the big issue? Look at it again. unless you're circumcised, according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. Well, surely they've got to live in a godly way. Surely these new Gentile believers have to live in a way that honors God. Isn't that what we're called to do? Well, yes. And Paul believes that and teaches that throughout his letters, that we are called to a holy life. God has bought us as a price and called us to a holy life. But that's not the issue here. Look what it says. Unless you are circumcised, you cannot be saved. Unless you go through this ritual, this religious ceremony, this historical religious ceremony, you cannot be saved. And for Paul, the whole gospel was at stake. For Paul, this was an attack on the very foundation of the good news of Jesus Christ. And he could not let it go. This was a point where he could not be moved on. Why? Because he firmly believed no grace, no gospel. No grace, no gospel. You see, Paul and Barnabas know that we've all fallen short of the glory of God. I don't know how your term's been, your first term. Some of you have had good first terms. You've got stuck into church, CIS, your sports team. You'll be buzzing, looking forward to a new term ahead. Others may be sitting here going, oh, I'm hanging on by my fingernails. Just. You won't be alone if that's what you're thinking. And you'll be sitting here going, am I really good enough to be in a room full of Christian sport players? Do I really fit here? If they only knew what my term had been like, how would they view me? Would they even think I should be a leader of a CIS group? And you see, we tend to do that all the time, don't we? Look around us and judge our Christian walk by how we've performed and what we do. And we tend to relate to God in that way too. Does he really love me? It's such a shocking month. If I just do really well this month, then maybe God will love me. And we begin to drift from the grace of the gospel. And Paul says, no grace, no gospel. And Paul knows that we're sinners. He knows that we fall short of God's glory, and he knows that the only way we can be saved is by the death of Jesus Christ. So the dispute raged on, and therefore they had to settle it. They couldn't just keep arguing. They then traveled back to Jerusalem, to where the rest of the disciples were, and they gathered them together for a debate, a council, to discuss what way is the church going to go. Are these Jewish guys right that you have to be circumcised? Or is Paul right, there's no grace, no gospel? I had a friend once who's a decent rugby player, and he lived the life of a rugby player, if you know what I mean. Those of you who know the rugby teams at university kind of know what I mean. And he loved that life. He thoroughly reveled in it. Not only the alcohol, but the sex, all aspects of that kind of rugby lad life. And then something must have grabbed his attention, because he started to look into the good news of Jesus Christ. I mean, bizarrely, you would never expect this guy to do that. And he approached a friend who he played with, who was a Christian, and started to ask questions about what it means to become a Christian. This friend was absolutely shocked, couldn't understand why this guy was even interested. Surely not this guy. But he also knew what this guy was like. He knew what he did. He knew how he lived. He knew what was going on behind the scenes as well as what was portrayed publicly. And so he said to him, look, here's the deal, right? To be a Christian, you've just got to stop doing some of the things you're doing. You know, if you really want to be serious about following Jesus, stop doing some of the stuff that you're doing. And he laid it out for him. And then come back to me in a few weeks and we'll have a chat about becoming a Christian. That rugby player went away very sad. He'd been reading the Bible, he'd been looking into the gospel, and he'd been caught by the idea that God loved him and had laid his life down for him, that he was such a sinner that there was nothing he could do. Only God could save him. And yet, from what his friend was saying, that didn't seem true. No grace, no gospel. So then the debate rages down in Jerusalem. They go down, and as you see down in verse 5, these same guys from the party of the Pharisees say, look, the Gentiles must be circumcised and, an addition here, required to keep the law of Moses. So good that they believe in Jesus, but they've got to do this as well, and then they can be saved. Ring a bell? People probably haven't told you to be circumcised and obey the law of Moses. Unlikely in this day and age. But you need to stop doing this and start doing this, and then you can be saved. And if you don't, you can't. Basically, that's what they're saying. And so the disciples and the leaders in Jerusalem, they gather and they have this debate, and Peter stands up. Remember Peter? Remember him in Acts chapter 10, and the vision he had of the food coming down and Cornelius being saved. He was the first one to share the gospel with the Gentiles. And Peter stands up, and he is having none of it. Brothers, you know that some time ago God made a choice among you that the Gentiles might hear from my lips the message of the gospel and believe. God, who knows the heart, showed that he accepted them by giving the Holy Spirit to them just as he did to us. He did not discriminate between us and them, for he purified their hearts by faith. Now then, why do you try to test God by putting on the necks of the Gentiles a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors have been able to bear? No, we believe it is through the grace of our Lord Jesus that we are saved, just as they are. Peter steps up and says, no. Stop trying to put a yoke of law and rules on the shoulders of these Gentiles. Because you know what? We've failed for centuries and generations to live lives good enough to make us holy enough to be acceptable to God. The only reason we can stand here today and say we are saved is because Jesus died in our place. It is through the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ we are saved. Don't go backwards. See the wonder of what God has done through his Son. And marvel at the fact that he's made it possible for the Gentiles to be saved too. Then Paul and Barnabas step up, don't they? And they just tell stories. They bear witness to what God has been doing. And people are astounded. They start telling the signs and wonders God had done among the Gentiles through them. And the whole assembly was silent. And when they finished, James spoke up. So Paul shares of what he's seen and what he's heard and what he's experienced. Peter shares of what he saw and what happened in Cornelius' life. And they say, no, it is by grace we are saved. Can you remember when you first realized what God had done for you? Can you remember? For me, it was March 12, 1992. Some of you weren't even born then. That scares me. But I can remember it vividly when I realized for the first time that, well, Jesus had to die. Otherwise, there was no way I could be saved. I first was aware of my sinfulness. And I first grasped how much he loved me through his death on the cross. And then I realized that he's alive, that he rose from the dead, and that it is finished. He has paid it once and for all so that I can be a son of God, a co-heir with Christ. I can have life everlasting. Do you remember that moment for you? Some of you, it has been a gradual process, others, a moment. Do you remember a time where you've seen somebody else come to know the Lord Jesus for the first time? How exciting that is. A friend of yours, like Linda with Neo, seeing somebody who you felt was so far away, suddenly transformed by the good news of Jesus Christ. It's thrilling. There's nothing more thrilling in life than that. It's just extraordinary to see God change somebody's eternity. Let's pause for a moment. Turn to the person next to you. You've got a minute and a half each, okay? Just describe what it was like for you. Off you go. Okay, pause there. Pause there for a moment. I love doing that with people. I do encourage you to keep doing that throughout this week, because it's thrilling, isn't it, to hear how the Lord opens people's eyes. There's 65 different stories of what God has done in your life, of how he has transformed you. It's thrilling. And back here in Acts chapter 15, Peter has confirmed what Paul and Barnabas disputed, that there's no grace, then there's no gospel. And we see now that James brings the whole council to decision. He's the leader, and he brings it to a close. And look how he does that. Verse 14. Simon, that's Peter, has described to us how God first intervened to choose a people for his name from the Gentiles. The words of the prophets are in agreement with this, as it is written, "After this I will return and rebuild David's fallen tent. Its ruins I will rebuild, and I will restore it, that the rest of mankind may seek the Lord, even all the Gentiles who bear my name, says the Lord, who does these things, known from long ago. It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God." So James brings the debate to a decision. And the way he does that is, well, quite extraordinary, really. Not only does he say, yes, Paul, yes, Peter, but yes, this has always been God's plan. It's not a new thing. It's not a newfangled idea. God always purposed to bring the Gentiles to himself. He always purposed to show us his grace. He quotes Amos chapter 9. That's the bit we've got with the exclamation marks. Not exclamation marks, what is it? Quotation marks. That's right. English was never my strong point. "After this I'll return and rebuild David's fallen tent. Its ruins I will rebuild and I will restore it." It's like a foretaste of the resurrection. David's fallen tent, Jesus being resurrected. "That the rest of mankind may see the Lord, even all the Gentiles who bear my name." Amos foretold that the Gentiles would be saved, that God would save them. So James says, hey, look, it's not Paul's idea, it's not Peter's initiative, it's God's. It's always been his purpose and his plan. That he has called a people to himself that were not his people. That includes you and me, doesn't it? That includes us. We are part of that inheritance. That since the beginning of time, God has purpose to call us to himself. Those stories you just shared, those 65 moments of grace impacting lives, God planned to do that. God did it. He intervened in time, space, and history and showed you his great love for you through his Son, Jesus Christ. Isn't that extraordinary? Isn't that awesome in its assurance? God doesn't make mistakes. And even though we often treat our Christian lives like our sporting performance and look at it and go, oh, there's no way I can be saved because look at the way I live. He looks at us and goes, paid for by my Son, Jesus Christ. Clean through his blood. White because he died on the cross for you. White as snow, pure, sin-free because it's paid for on the cross. And you are sons and daughters of the living God. Jesus is alive. And we can walk in that security that we are his. And yes, he calls us to live with him and for him. And to do that, he gives us his Spirit that lives in us and enables us to live lives that before we could never live. Our role is to continue to have faith in him, to trust in Christ's death on the cross, to trust in God's word, and to step out and live in it by the power of the Spirit. It's a wonderful privilege to be a Christian. It's a wonderful privilege to understand God's grace, and James confirms it to the whole council. This game-changing moment in the church's history is emphatically no to the party of the Pharisees. It's not works that save you. It's God's grace through his Son, Jesus Christ. Remember my rugby friend? Remember what his friend said to him? Well, I have to admit that the friend that told him that he had to stop doing things before he could become a Christian was me. You see, at that time, I misunderstood what the gospel was about. All I could see before me was what this guy was doing and knew that it wasn't right. And it wasn't right. But I forgot who had the power to change him. He didn't have the power to change him. He was the same as me, a sinner. But God has the power. And thankfully, and by God's grace, another Christian in our rugby squad was able to share the gospel with him and say, well, where Greg's mistaken is here, and actually what the gospel is this. And it's been amazing to watch over the last 8 years what God has done in that guy's life. As he has taken a guy that I could never, ever believe could ever possibly become a Christian, and through his word and by the power of his Spirit has transformed him step by step by step to a guy now that, well, many of our rugby team perhaps wouldn't even recognize because of the life that's been transformed. It's incredible what God does. And yet so often we can miss the point of the gospel, communicate a gospel of works rather than a gospel of grace. Hey, we do that easily. Let me show you how you do that easily. Ever been in a bar? Obviously, you're students. And somebody says to you, why aren't you getting hammered? And you, oh no, here we go. And you think, oh, how do I respond to that? And very often our response is this. I know I need to say something. It's a good opportunity for the gospel. What do I do? Well, I don't get drunk because I'm a Christian. And then the conversation kind of ends and they move away. And you think, yes, I've stood up for the gospel. Have you? Very often people assume that Christians are people that just don't do things, don't they? And very often it's us that affirms that in their heads. Because they say, oh, why don't you get drunk? It's because I'm a Christian. And they go away thinking, oh, that's what Christians do. To be a Christian, you have to not get drunk. That's what being a Christian is. Perhaps that's what you felt and thought. But of course, what you're trying to say is, I just don't want to. My life has changed, and now I want to live for God. In fact, my motivation to live is for him, and I want to honor him, and I want to be with him. And you know what? I know that if I get drunk, I just won't do that. I'll live for me, and I'll glorify me and not him. That's why I just don't want to. Life is different now. And that's not because I have to, it's because I don't want to, because I'm saved by a God who loves me, and I want to live with him, and I want to live for him. And that's what we want our friends to hear, isn't it? We want them to see that good God, that glorious, gracious, loving God. So here in Acts 15, we have a dispute that still rages today. Each day you'll have to look in the mirror and remind yourself of God's grace. Saved by grace, not by works. He loves me because of his Son, Jesus Christ. I'm saved because of what he has done, not how I perform. Yes, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I want to live for you, Lord. Help me, Lord. The debate. Remember that wonderful, thrilling moment of when you first grasp the gospel. Never lose that thrill. Never stop being thrilled and seeing others come to know the Lord Jesus. It's a extraordinary thing, isn't it? And then the decision. God's grace is for everyone. Even my rugby friend, even your hockey friend, your football friend, your frisbee friend. Even that person in your changing room that there's no chance they'll become a Christian. God's grace, God's gospel is incredibly powerful. In life, moments change history. In sport, moments change games. Today it's your turn. 1978 it started in universities across the UK. Today it's your turn. I've seen 11 generations of university students go through. It's been a real privilege to see and to look around the room today and see faces and this generation Because it's your turn now. Your turn to carry that good news into the universities across this country, to the sports teams, to the sports clubs, where nobody else goes. Today, the exciting journey continues. You're running a leg. You are in a relay that has been going for generations, and people have gone before you in your universities and done the same thing, and God has done incredible things through it. Today, you take that up and you run that leg. Not because you're worthy, but because you're saved by a God who loves you. And you have a message to witness to. You have a God to bear witness to what he has done and is doing in your life. And today we remember that it is only by his grace that we're saved. It is his grace that saves us. It's his grace to us that makes us want to be witnesses in sports clubs and teams in every university in this country. Because we agree with Peter, don't we? In verse 11 when he says, no. We believe it's through the grace of our Lord Jesus that we are saved, just as they are.